All right, as we mentioned in the previous video, we're going to discuss the secondary functionality of the TP camera class, and that'll actually be the first part that we code into that class so that we can handle all of the primary functionality layer by layer with absolute focus. So let's start off just jotting down some basic notes. So TP camera secondary functionality. All right. Now the first thing we're going to handle, it's actually, no, okay, hang on, let me back up. In the last video we mentioned that the primary thing that, the secondary functionality is just checking to see if we have a camera that exists. If it doesn't, we're going to make one. If it does exist, we're going to take control of it. That is essentially what we're going to be talking about here. But there's one more thing that we will be handling, and that is our awake method.
Well, yeah, we actually have to build our TP camera class to start with, so we're actually going to,
right,
just like the TP motor and TP controller, it's going to have an awake function. It's going to have its own static field called instance, and we're going to create that, and then we're going to assign it to equal this in awake.
Right, and this is exactly like what we've done twice in our other two previous classes. I just wanted to mention that as soon as we get started, we're going to have to make the TP camera class, and we'll go ahead and get the awake function, or the awake method, excuse me, Maya person. We'll get the awake method out of the way, right, and handle all of the static instance field and its setting up and all that.
Right.
Then we can jump over to the actual secondary functionality, which is
our use existing.
Yeah, this is such a great name. So use existing or create new main camera.
I was kind of worried people wouldn't understand what this method did.
Yeah, you know, the title is alone should have chapters almost. So now, inside of this method, what are we going to be doing? What do we need?
Well, we're going to need a couple of local fields just to hold stuff temporarily as we're working.
Okay.
We're going to need two game objects.
All right.
One is going to be our temp camera. The other will be our target lookout.
Are you lowercasing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Local will be lowercase.
Let me make sure that I write that correctly. So you'll do temp camera, and the other one will be?
Will be target lookout.
Okay. Now, because these are game object field, these are referencing actual objects in our scene.
Yes. I'm using them as placeholders, so if we find stuff in our scene, we can point these to them. If we have to create them by hand, we'll point the game objects that we create to these.
All right, so this will end up holding a camera.
Yep. It will either hold the camera we found or the one we made, but it will hold a camera.
Yeah. Basically, well, it'll end up holding the main camera, whichever way it goes. And then this will hold the lookout object.
Yep. Same thing. It's going to look in the scene if it finds one. If it does, it'll point to that. If we have to create one, it will point what we create, or point to what we create. But at the end, it will have a look at or target look at to point to.
Now, if we're going to do that, then we're probably up near the very beginning. We're going to have to establish some other things next to our static instance property.
Right, because we're actually going to have a look at target that our camera is going to point to. We need to save that after we create it.
Right.
What we're going to do is we're going to create another field, a public field, that is going to be of type transform, and we're going to call it look at target look at with capital T.
Okay, and that's where we'll actually store it when all is said and done.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, our temp camera, we don't have to save permanently because we can access it via the camera.main camera property.
So the way we can say this real quick, even though, okay, this is not exactly order dependent. I'm not too worried about the order, but then we'll also have our instance field.
Yes.
and these will be the fields that we'll have to establish with the class when we get started.
Yep.
All right, and then down within our use existing or create new main camera method, we're also going to create 2 fields local to this method.
Well, we're going to create 3, but we've got
3.
two.
Okay.
We've got 2
listed.
fields that are game objects,
Mhm.
and we've got another one that we're going to create that is actually of type TP camera.
Okay.
And this is going to be the reference to the script that we attach to the main camera once we find one or create one.
Okay. So 2 game objects field, 1 field of type TP camera.
Yep. We're going to name that one My Camera.
All right.
Just in case you were curious.
And this will hold what exactly?
It will hold a reference to the script, to the TP camera script that we attach to our main camera.
Okay.
So these are local fields that we're just saving temporarily to help facilitate the creation of the main camera.
Okay. All right. So there's what we need so far. I think I'm going to need another piece of paper. So this and voila. There we go. Okay. So now we've established what we need. We need to create the class.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to create 2 fields, one for our static instance, just like what we've been doing up to this point. We'll create another field which will end up holding our target look at once we find out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to create our use existing or create new main camera method. That method is going to have 3 fields of its own.
Mm-hmm.
The first will be temp camera, which will end up holding the main camera, either the one that we find in the scene or the one that we create. We're also going to have the
Target look at.
target look at, thank you. The target look at, which that's what we're going to use to find the look at object in the scene, and then we'll end up saving that up to our field at the top of the class. And then we're going to have our my camera field, which will just end up holding a reference to this particular instance of the TP camera script applied to our camera.
Right.
What are we doing from here? So now we've got some work to do.
Right. Now that we've got our 3 temporary fields, we actually need to go through the process. The very first thing we're going to do is look and see if we have a main camera in our scene.
So we're going to check, see if we have a main camera in the scene.
If we do, we're going to take the temp camera field and point it to it.
Basically use that camera.
Mm-hmm.
If not,
We have to create a camera.
create one and use that.
Yep.
And that process is, well, it's got some steps of its own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because if we make a camera, we're not just going to say, create camera. We've got to create a game object.
We need to create an empty game object that we name main camera. The name doesn't really mean anything, but just
Right.
naming it main camera kind of makes it easy to find in
Sure.
your scene hierarchy.
So we'll create an object. We'll apply the camera component to it.
Yep. So we're going to call the add component method, which will add a camera component to it, which is what actually makes that game object a camera.
And then we'll end up having to tag it as the main camera.
Yep. Because if we don't set the tag to main camera, it's not the main camera.
Right. So that's how we'll end up creating one. Either way, by the end of this point, our
Target look
target
at
look
is...
no, not target look at our temp camera.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Temp
Yeah.
camera.
Our
Our temp camera is going to be pointing to a
temp camera, yeah, is going to equal some camera or some main camera.
Right.
Whether it found one or whether we had to make one, at this point, temp camera will have something to work from.
Yep.
So that's the idea here. That's the first step of the process. Now, I'm writing like crazy, so let's go ahead and grab a new sheet of paper. Now, we have our main camera. Now what are we going to do?
Well, we have to attach our TP camera script to that main camera.
Okay.
So we're going to add a TP camera script component to our main camera.
So now we add this script that we're creating. We'll go ahead and say it's the component, because that's what it is, the script component.
Yep.
To whatever's in temp camera.
Exactly.
We'll just say temp camera. And technically it's the main camera, but it's being stored in temp camera. All right.
And then we're going to have to go grab the reference to that script component, and we're going to throw that into the my camera field that we created.
So, oh, hang on. I think I was about to type the word, or write the word stereo. So let's store a reference to this instance of the TP camera script. And that's going to go inside my camera, which we discussed earlier.
Right.
All right. So now not only have we added our script to the camera at this point, which is going to be necessary because in the end that's going to control the behavior. Now we've got a reference to it, so we can call on that script by name, which is actually going to be important in a minute. But before we do that, we've got to take an aside because we've got to check and see if we have a target look at somewhere in our scene. So it's almost like at this point we pause for just a moment and say, okay, yeah, back to our scene for a minute. Did we have a target look at over there?
Right, because our camera system relies on that for its positional information and where it has to look at, where it's orienting to at the end of the motion. So if we don't have a target look at, our camera system's going to break.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to look in the scene and see if we have a game object called target look at. If we do, we're going to set our target look at field to equal that game object that it found.
That's right. In fact, here's how I'm writing that. We'll check for a target look at object, and let me just specify, this is actually in the scene. We'd have to know that it existed. If we have one, we're going to store it in target look at, and notice the casing. This is in the lowercase field. It's actually a part of this method. If not, if we don't have one,
yeah, we have to go create one.
Yep. We're going to create one at the origin.
Yep.
And I'll designate that with 000.
So what that's going to do is it's going to ensure whether or not the person who's making the level remembered to put a target look at in the scene or not. We're going to have a target look at by the time it finishes this process.
So we'll create one, then assign it to target look at. Well, we'll just point back up to that guy.
Right.
So either way, that lowercase target look at will have some look at object at this point of the game.
Right. And then once we've got that look at target, we're going to assign that target look at's transform to the target look at that we created at the top of the field with the capital T.
That's right. So, well, at this point, we'd be done with our little aside. We will have made our check. So we can say...
We can call my camera, which is an instance of our TP camera class.
Right. It's literally the one that is currently bolted onto the camera that is in our scene. And we can set its capital target look at to be equal to, and okay, I'm going to really simplify the syntax here, but essentially we can set it to the lowercase version. Because at that point, the lowercase version will be holding whatever's in there.
Right.
Now, the syntax is actually more involved with than that. We've got to do gameObject.find.transform and all kinds of stuff. But I'm simplifying just for the case of writing it out. We're going to take our uppercase version of the field, which is at the class level, and assign to it whatever value is currently stored inside the lowercase value, which is inside our method.
Right.
So at that point, let's just kind of cover... now, we've kind of broken it down. We've almost gone line by line and explained the code at this point. So, just starting at the very beginning, we start off by setting up a field for our temp camera. Well, actually, we got 3 fields to create.
Right.
We're going to do one for our temp camera. We're going to do one for our look at object. And then we're going to do one more that is going to
hold our camera script.
our camera. Our camera script. That's right. Then, as soon as we do that, we're going to check and say, hey, is there a camera in the scene? If so, grab it, because we're going to need to use it. If not, assemble one from all the necessary components, and then we'll use that. Then we need to add our TP camera script to that camera, so we bolt that onto the side of it. We're going to store a reference of that particular script so that we can call on it later. Once we have that reference, we're going to stop. We're going to set the camera aside for a minute and go look back over in the scene one more time and say, hey, did you see a target look at object? You know, something we should be looking at? If you see one, cool. Let's go ahead and store that inside our lowercase target look at. If you don't see one, make one at the origin and we'll assign that one. Either way, by the time you get done, make sure that we've got something we can look at. Then we jump back, we pick our camera up again, and we say, hey, that script, that instance of the script we have, we want to set its capital target look at field to be whatever we found, essentially.
Right.
So that it's actually pointing at some object that is located in the scene.
Right. Yeah, and once all that's done, we're still not done.
Yeah, we're still not done. This is really just a simple, basic part of the functionality. Again, so yeah, we're checking the scene twice.
Right.
Check it once for a camera, assemble some stuff, check it again for a target look at, and assemble some stuff, and then we're set to go.
Right, and once we're done with that, our TP camera for the first part is finished. But we still have to go back to the TP controller, and we have to tell the TP controller, or in a way, TP controller is going to tell TP camera to go ahead and look for this camera and start this whole process. And we call that from inside of TP controller.
That's true. There's no point inside TP camera that actually fires the use existing or create new main camera method. Am I right?
Correct. That it only gets called from TP controller in our case.
That's such a long name.
But you can't mistake what it does.
That's true. So TP controller must fire that off. The TP camera only holds the functionality. It has no means of triggering it. So our very last step will be to jump back over to TP controller and make sure that that functionality does get fired at the beginning of the game. So we'll be handling that inside TP controller's awake. So I know what we're going to do. I mean, I can already almost see what the code's going to look like at this point. So I guess we're wrapped up here. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and create our TP camera class. We'll put in just the basics that we've discussed so far. So we'll go ahead and get our awake method in. We'll go ahead and put in our static instance field so we have some way to reference this particular class from within other classes. We'll put in our capital target look at field as well. And then we'll set up our use existing or create new main camera method. Since it's the only method we're covering, we're not even going to worry about a skeleton. We'll go ahead and get all of the functionality for that in place. We'll jump back over to TP controller and make sure that that fires off this method, and then we can move on from there looking at the primary functionality of TP camera. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the coding process. Thanks a lot.